We are here with Adam Cox, all the way from UK, London more specifically, and he's going to tell us all about his 4D hypnosis, the time and the space and the subconscious mind. Adam, tell us all about it.
Hi, Carmen. Nice to be on your show. So at the Mid America conference, I'm going to be talking about 4D hypnosis or 4D thinking, so four-dimensional thinking. And one of the things that I love doing when I do hypnosis is use metaphor. So one of my favorite things to do. And I take a lot of inspiration from movies. And one of my favorite genres of movie is kind of time travel and science fiction. And what I found is that when I did hypnosis sessions that was inspired by things that, let's say, play with space and time, it was mapping across a lot with certain principles of hypnotherapy. So a lot of hypnotherapists will use things like regression, which is kind of time travel going back. Most hypnotherapists will use things like future pacing or pseudo orientation in time, which is taking the client to a future that doesn't exist yet. If you think about PTSD, quite often one of the things that a client will do is relive a moment from the past, like they're in a first person perspective. And a lot of anticipatory fear is experiencing something that could happen, that hasn't happened, as if it's happening in the moment. So it kind of dawned on me that what's happening in our imagination seems to be a different realm from what's happening in our reality. In our reality, we're in a three-dimensional world where time is linear, it only moves forwards, and yet our imagination can go backwards and forwards in time. We can take on a different perspective, for therapists that use things like association and disassociation. That's a first person or third person perspective. Hypnotists are intuitive at using this kind of stuff because we can in the realm of the imagination, but I can't teleport into your body and you can't teleport into mine in reality because we live in a three-dimensional reality. It is possible for you to do that within your imagination. And, I've done a lot of hypnotherapy over the last kind of 12 years. My belief as to what hypnotherapy is to utilize our imagination for therapeutic benefits. And the more I looked into it and the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like our imagination is more like a four-dimensional realm than it is a three-dimensional realm. And that's what I'm going to be talking about.
I love that. And I love you bringing out dimensionality. I work with dimensions too. But tell me more about it. Now, what other people want to understand is that four-dimensional time is the present time moment to which you take your client, whether back and forth, accessing different dimensions through their imagination, which we know the power of imagination is just the most powerful a human can have is imagination.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is that physics can give us distinction. So if we think about a straight line, that's effectively one dimension. It has no depth. It only has forwards and backwards along the line. A two-dimensional shape, for example, like a square or a triangle, again, it has no depth, has no volume, but it does have the ability to go up and down on that two-dimensional plane. We as humans live in a three-dimensional reality. So we have the ability to perceive depth. We have the ability to assess where we are and interact with our environment. But there's certain things that we can't do in the same way that a two-dimensional character couldn't comprehend our three-dimensional reality. Certain things would be invisible to a two-dimensional entity in a three-dimensional world.
Correct.
As humans, as three-dimensional entities, there's so many things that we couldn't comprehend in a four-dimensional world, for example. So one of the key distinctions is about time perception and perspectives. They're the key things. So for us in our three-dimensional reality, time is linear and it only moves forward. So we can't travel back in time. and our perception is limited to where we are and what we perceive within our senses. But a four-dimensional entity would be able to have multiple perceptions concurrently. So, for example, this thought experiment of Schrodinger's cat, where you have the cat in a sealed chamber, the reason why that kind of mimics this idea of perception and reality is, while the cat is in this chamber with this poisonous gas, until you open it, there is the possibility that the cat is alive and dead. So therefore, before you open the box, both realities coexist, or both possibilities coexist. And it only becomes true when you can confirm what's happened with some kind of sense. That might be sight, or it might be some kind of sensor inside, but you can only know through verification, and then that makes the reality. And that maps across within physics what's called the double slit experiment, where particles act, depending on if they're observed or not. So you have this kind of very strange phenomenon. In a four-dimensional reality, it's possible to hold multiple perceptions simultaneously because things are in a state called flux. So in four-dimensional shapes, for example, like a tesseract, for example, would be a four-dimensional version of a cube. It's in constant motion. And we know that because the shadow of a cube, when it's being rotated, looks like the perception of a tesseract. Now, we can never perceive a tesseract because we're three-dimensional entities. But in the same way that you can perceive a three-dimensional shape on a two-dimensional plane, like if I drew a cube, you would know what a cube looks like even if I put it on a two-dimensional plane. Like I can draw a three-dimensional shape.
Yes.
We can have a perception of a four-dimensional shape even in our three-dimensional realities. Now, the reason why this is useful is that if our imagination acts more like a four-dimensional realm, and we have this idea of the fluidity of time and multiple realities coexisting, what some people would call the multiverse, so infinite parallel universes, these can become tools that hypnotherapists can use to actually give a very different experience for the client. So for example, one of the things I like to do with clients is to create the thought experiment of, if there was infinite parallel universes, this kind of multiverse, what's the version of them that's already got through this problem that they're currently facing?
I like that.
And let's visit that reality, and then they can observe, so disassociation, how did they get through this particular problem? And it creates the idea that someone with their exact genetics has able to have had the problem and get through it. And then that creates this idea that it's also possible for them. There's an element of priming. So, what I'm keen to do is to emphasize that I'm not saying that the imagination or thought is a four-dimensional realm. I'm just saying it has parallels more with the fourth dimension than it does with the three-dimensional world that we live in which case hypnotherapists can interact with their clients differently by using four-dimensional metaphor to create either perceptual differences or time differences at a new level of distinction that they couldn't do if we try and project a three-dimensional reality into the imagination of a client. It's a different realm. It's a different, the rules of physics don't apply in the imagination. And we know that's true because how many times have you had a dream of flying or a dream of being in a future or a past? Like, that can't happen in reality, but our dreams definitely are not a three-dimensional reality because there's things you can teleport. You can start in one environment and then suddenly be in another, and it all seems to make sense. So I would say dreams and imagination are much more like a four-dimensional realm than a three-dimensional realm. And as hypnotherapists, what if that's a useful framework so that we can work with clients in a different way?
Oh, it's definitely useful, and especially if the client has seen a sci-fi movie with the teleportation, it would just make it so easy for them to reimagine. And even if you give them the image, like imagine you here and then imagine you there in whatever chamber or another chamber, it's absolutely definitely useful. Gestalt therapy does that. You use the two chairs and then you face each other, and then the first chair is the one that comes to us with a problem, and the other chair is the client talking to the version of themselves in the multiverse that they need to resolve. And it's quite magical. And I definitely like this metaphor. Teleportation, transportation, cubes, 3D, 4D, and all of them are very important aspects. Yes, because we are in physical form coming to a practitioner like you to do something about feeling better. But it is the thoughts that been registered in the neuroscience that we need help to remove them.
I think Einstein had a great quote, and something along the lines that you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that got you into that situation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So therefore, isn't it useful to have a very different way of thinking about the problem? And that could be from a different perception. That could be from a different point in time. There's lots of ways. One of the things I like to do in a session is to take the client into a future version of themselves 1 year. And what would it be like 1 year of not having that phobia, not having that addiction, 1 year of already having lost the weight that they want to lose, and then think backwards and then think, what did it take to make that reality real? And to realize, because a lot of people have this idea that they have to be perfect in order, that they can't make one mistake, one relapse.
Correct.
In order. So one of the things I like to do is to take them to that future version. And let's say they've lost weight or they've gained confidence. And it's kind of like, and recall that you didn't need to be perfect to get where you've got to, that you could make mistakes, and then it primes them for mitigating relapses, but also that it's consistency over time that is one of the most effective ways for them to actually get the result. And actually, a blip is no big deal if it's just a blip. If someone lives a future as a non-smoker and they realize that, okay, maybe there was 2 or 3 times that they did take a step backwards, but it still got to a point where they quit for good. What's the big deal? And a lot of smokers are have this sort of Damocles hanging over their head that if they just have 1 cigarette, then it means they're a smoker again. Well, that's a disempowering belief because it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. So playing with time and playing with perception is great. I think a lot of hypnotherapists, particularly with certain addictions, have used the future pacing where they go to the inevitable outcome of a destructive behavior. They get to see themselves on a deathbed full of regret. It's like, well, who wouldn't want to kind of go back in time? I mean, that's the essence at some level of the Dickens pattern, which is see the future that you don't want, to create that point of threshold, to create the motivation to change in the present. And then effectively you're playing with time. You're playing with time by saying, right, knowing what I now know could be a future, how can I make that future not happen? And that's kind of the premise of almost every time travel movie, is that they see the future, something bad happens, but they get to go back in time and change it. What a great concept for change. But
this is what hypnotherapy does. That's what we do in hypnosis. Right? Often I would go back, but also use the future, like you said. Imagine what it would be like, and what's your experience when you've achieved the goal, and then what it's just powerful, very, very powerful.
It is, and I think it's a very versatile tool, because I think a lot of trainers will train someone on a particular technique, whereas when I talk about 4-dimensional thinking, it's more of a paradigm than a technique. Because if you start thinking that, okay, the imagination of the client is a 4-dimensional realm, and therefore all of the tools that would only work in the 4th dimension, that wouldn't work in our 3-dimensional reality, are now possible within a therapeutic context. So time travel, perception travel, multiple realities, even distorting the laws of physics. Think of the rewind technique. Isn't that just like doing something in reverse. You can't do that in physical reality, but you can do it in your imagination. And some of the most effective tools that we have in hypnotherapy and therapy in general are based on four-dimensional thinking, not three-dimensional realities.
Correct.
That's not a coincidence.
No,
That's
it's not.
because these things are very kind of powerful, and the human mind is not bound by the laws of three-dimensional realities. Gravity does not exist. Think of how many times the induction or deepener suggestion of floating is used. Well, gravity exists in our three-dimensional reality, but in a four-dimensional reality is not bound by the same laws of physics. Therefore, we can use sensory distortions that we can't use in reality. When you perceive them, you start to feel them, and that gives an experience to the client. So, the reason I like talking about this kind of stuff is that it feels like it's opening up, a new horizon for hypnotherapists that might be too stuck in certain patterns of, I do this technique, I do this protocol. Once you start looking at the lens that actually there is so much more creativity and flexibility,
Yes.
it then gives us more ability to be nuanced and creative and have fun, but also create profound change for the clients that we're working with.
I agree 100%. I agree. I myself, I don't particularly like a single technique or a single modality, because you can't just use only one tool. The imagination, it's unlimited, and every client they might have, let's say, PTSD, but not all of them is the same. And oftentimes we have post-traumatic injury, and we still refer to it as stress. And it's not just mental, emotional stress, it's physical, it's injury that has happened, trauma to your body, which is very different than PTSD. So the same PTSD approach will not work the same for someone that has sustained significant injury to their body. It's different. So yes, I 100% agree. Don't stick to just one technique or one modality. This is where we start. Of course, we start with techniques and modalities, but then to have a shift in perspective using this 4D time and space as you bring out, it's a yes. It's a yes for me.
Yeah, and it's super fun as well to actually kind of do that with clients, because it gives them a very different kind of experience. And I think there's only really two parallels that I've found that we as humans living in a three-dimensional reality can get close to what a four-dimensional reality could be like. And one is things like virtual reality and the metaverse, because in virtual reality and a metaverse, you could go back to a different time, you could take on a different perspective, you could wear the skin of a different character and kind of play their role. So that's one way that we can get close to a four-dimensional reality. But the only other thing is the imagination. And we're hypnotherapists, we're not computer coders and gamers. So it's kind of like the imagination becomes the canvas in which we can help clients have a 4D experience. But it's not just, because you could have that just as like an experience, like guided meditation to get insight and thought experiments. But why not do it deliberately to change something that the client wants? That might be access a resort stay, break a pattern, do something useful for them that deals with the thing. And I think that's where the Venn diagrams overlap, is that you give them this wonderful experience, but you make it therapeutically beneficial as well.
Correct. And something we must keep in mind that clients come to us to change something. So whatever it is they want to change, and often we are the last resort, as a lot of them. I have a lot of clients that have gone through significant amount of psychotherapy. So, and other clients that hypnosis is the last resort. And it is the most amazing, magical, fantastic, achieving a tool that we can utilize, and more people need to know about it. So what else you want to tell us? You have a very famous podcast. So tell us about it.
So I created this podcast at the beginning of the pandemic. I was working in a a very prestigious location in London, had high profile clients, but I'm fairly good at reading trends, and I could see when the pandemic started that I was going to have less clients that I could physically work with in front of me. So I ended the lease on that therapy room, and I wanted to have an outlet for my hypnosis creatively, and just as a way to kind of experiment with different types of hypnotherapy. So I created a podcast, and it wasn't a training podcast for other hypnotherapists, and it wasn't just doing hypnosis sessions that were quite generic. I wanted to have a hypnosis podcast that featured real hypnosis based on real client issues, and actually use the hypnosis that I used for the actual client that I was working with, but protecting the confidentiality of that client. And that felt appealing to me because some of the books that I really enjoyed when I was learning to become a hypnotherapist were the real transcripts of real therapeutic sessions, not step-by-step protocols and kind of techniques, but what did Milton Erickson do with that particular client to lead to the breakthrough? Or what did Richard Bandler do, to help that particular phobic in that situation? So I thought, right, real hypnosis becomes the thing. And to begin with, it didn't do very well. I was just sharing my weight loss hypnosis sessions. What made it grow was I took inspiration from movies. So the first movie that I took inspiration from was a movie called Limitless with Robert De Niro and Bradley Cooper, where he takes
Love
this
it.
pill and then suddenly his
Love
brain
it.
is supercharged. And I turned that into a hypnosis session, put it on social media. And in the pandemic, everyone's bored, they've got nothing to do. And I'm like, hey, I've done this hypnosis session based on the movie Limitless. Let me know if you want that session. So a lot of people did. And what I didn't know at the time is that I was training the algorithm of the podcast to know who to put my stuff in front of. And then I did that again with the movie Inception and movies like Fight Club, and all my favorite movies and books I turned into hypnotherapy sessions.
Mhm.
But instead of just sending them the audio, I sent them a link to my podcast. That trained the algorithm, and then suddenly my podcast was getting in front of other people. So it went from, in the early days, I was getting like 5 or 10 downloads a day. These days I get about 15,000 downloads a day. But it came from being a creative outlet, but also sharing real hypnosis sessions, but in that very confidential way. So now it's become this wonderful cycle where most of my clients learn about me through the podcast, and then that generates more clients, which generates more podcast sessions, which generate more clients. So it's been a wonderful thing. And I think now I know that there's two key audiences. The first audience is people that can resonate with the issue that I worked with someone else. So it's become
Yes,
free therapy for them.
correct.
So they can't sleep, so they put sleep hypnosis on Spotify, and then my face comes up and they listen to it. So that might be an issue. And then the other is hypnotherapists. And I think the nature of hypnotherapy is that it happens behind closed doors, and nobody really knows what the hypnotist is actually doing with the client. So I become a way for other hypnotherapists to say, right, what does a hypnosis session about, childhood trauma look like? And they can find that, they can have a listen. And it's
Mhm.
not the way, it's just my way, but they
Yes,
get a frame of reference, and they can say, well, I agree with 70% of that, but I would have done this different. But that's still more helpful than having no frame of reference. So
correct.
it's kind of the average person that wants to find a solution, plus other hypnotherapists that tend to listen to the show.
Yes, that's great. It's great. So I'm going to see you in person in just a couple of days at Mid America conference, right?
That's
Hypnosis
right.
conference.
Yeah.
So right here, everybody's gonna go get a ticket right here, hypnosisconference.org, right? Just right here. That's the. Okay, don't do that. Okay, just that. Here's the link. And everybody's going to get their package, whether it's the first level, second level, or third level. That's an all access pass anyway. You have access to all 3 days. But with the next level, you have additional and additional benefits. And if you cannot afford this, definitely go for this because it is well worth it. And we are going to be packed. We're going to have pre-conference workshops every day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We have a lunch buffet where you are still staying in the facility and get to talk to people and spend more time. Oh, and the lunch hour now, it's an hour and a half, which is a fantastic opportunity because you get to talk to more people as opposed to driving somewhere, waiting for the food. No, just right there on the spot. But then Friday night, I mean, if we just going to be packed with fun, Friday night we're going to have the Hypno Friends Feud game. Let me tell you, last year we got a little naughty. This is a place you want to be at. Then on Saturday, we get the red carpet gala, comedy, hypnosis show, and dancing. And also, you will have a unique opportunity to learn from Dr. Bandler and Chase Huge, both of them huge personality. But most important, you're going to go to the schedule right here, to the schedule, and you're going to locate Adam Cox on Saturday. See, each day has a different color. So on Saturday, you're going to join his presentation right here at right after lunch. There you go, right after lunch, after you spend some time chatting with him and other people, come in at 1:30 on Saturday to meet Adam to join his class on 4D hypnosis, time, space, and the subconscious mind. And then right here, if you click on here on this link, then you'll get his speakers page. Is going to where you get to learn more about his presentation, get a better sense, in addition to what he already presented, of what he's going to present, and much more about learning about Adam. So Adam, I look forward to seeing you in just just a couple more days. Yay!
It's very, very soon. Yeah, I fly out on Thursday, and yeah, it's going to be. I've never been to this conference, but I hear it's very good, and Rich seems to have done an amazing job at putting together something very fun. So I think it's going to be great.
Oh, this is the conference to be. This is the longest hypnosis conference in the United States, and the most fun. I'm going to other conferences, I love them all, but this one, it is just packed with fun, and it's packed with camaraderie too. So it's a very important aspect. And what Rich Gatzi is doing this year, he keeps saying he's taken over the entire hotel, and this is also going to be a cruise ship on land. But yeah, you don't need to leave the hotel anymore. Don't even rent a car from if you're flying in. Just get an Uber or a Lyft or whichever mode of transportation you want, and then that's all you need, because lunch is on. Well, there's a restaurant in the hotel, so you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner all in the same place with all of these wonderful people. The hypnotists are. So this is exciting. It's very exciting, and I look forward to seeing you in person, Adam.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, it's going to be good.